The SEC or Big Ten are battling it out. Caleb and I think they're both in pretty good shape. Maybe today's tough question is now.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
We ask you this question, and we want your thoughts on the message board. We'll put it on the poll question on YouTube. What will be the preeminent conference in 5 years, the SEC or the Big Ten? I believe we would all agree now it's the SEC, but Caleb, you seem to think that could change, sir.
Right now, and I want people to know this because I'm like some homer of a conference. Right now, it's not even close. The SEC is better. The Big Ten is closer to the ACC. The SEC is so much better than the Big Ten, even with the additions of the 4 schools that they added. The SEC is that the Big Ten added. The SEC is a significantly better conference, and it's a different level. It's AAA versus major leagues. Okay,
Agreed.
That's going to change in 5 years, and it will be the Big Ten. And I'm going to tell you guys why. We've talked about this before in football and recruiting. NIL is the equalizer. NIL is the equalizer when you don't have a fertile recruiting ground in your backyard. It is the great equalizer. Now, Tennessee has the best NIL collective right now. No questions asked. No doubt. But when you factor in the Big Ten TV deal that comes into play this year, which is worth $7 billion versus the SEC TV deal, which is worth $3 billion, every single year. And by the way, for the Big Ten, that's a 7-year deal. For the SEC, it's a 10-year deal. Here's what that means. In TV revenue alone, the Big Ten will be bringing in $1 billion to distribute among 18 schools, whereas the SEC will be bringing in $300 million to distribute among 16 schools.
Okay, let's remember that is not that number is I don't believe going to affect what the schools actually spend, because I believe at some point there's going to have to be a cap put in place.
Not on NIL. You can't put a cap on NIL. It will affect. Here's where I'm going with this.
And if you have a union.
Yes, but there's a bunch of other factors because NIL is not affiliated with the school. Technically, it's boosters. Boosters should be able to even like Dave, the NFL, the players have a union, so there's a cap on like the salaries, but they can make whatever money they want to make in endorsement deals. Like no one can sit there and tell LeBron James that you can't make $1 billion from Nike.
I'm going to tell you what I've been told in the last 24 hours, that within a year, all the NIL money is going to go through the schools. And at that point, I think they're going to ask the players to form some sort of union, and that's going to be the concession of there's some sort of salary cap. I don't see how there can't be a salary cap.
Okay, but here's the point. Okay, let's go back to it. The salary cap. The NCAA is not going to be the one running it. The conferences will. So the SEC will have a lower salary cap than the Big Ten because the SEC will not be bringing in the money the Big Ten is. And where I'm getting at is that. So again, let's point this out because people are going to question this. Can you agree with me on this? Even if NIL is not affiliated with the school, the amount of money a school brings in is relevant because the amount of money a school brings in lessens the money that boosters have to donate, so boosters can then just spend that money on NIL. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. That's a lot of money, more money the Big Ten is bringing in than the SEC. And you're seeing this, by the way, specifically with coaches. Big Ten is basically, Dave, I got some reporting. The Big Ten is stepping in and borderline forcing schools to fire coaches because they don't want schools to be complacent with their football programs up there. Don't think that may not have been a factor in Indiana firing Tom Allen.
Hey,
and what they're saying is
you got me to coaching, which is where I wanted to go. There is still something to be said for coaching in the SEC, and there will always be. And that is because unless you were born somewhere else, and even if you were born somewhere else, the South is the home of college football in particular, but football. And I think you'll always have the better coaches here because I'm going to put I'm going to try to cut you off the pass here. Yes, Ohio State could offer 20 million and Tennessee could only match at 10. But I don't believe that's going to be the case. And if Tennessee had to keep a Josh Heupel or Georgia had to keep a Kirby Smart, I believe they would find a way to match that money. So I think coaches are always going to want to be in the SEC, and I don't think money will change their minds. Am I right or wrong?
I think you're wrong because you're missing the fluid nature of college football. Dave, go back to the 1980s. The Big Ten coach, the SEC was maybe the home of college football. The Big Ten coaches were significantly better than SEC coaches for most of the 80s and the 90s. The SEC had a who's who of how the heck did you become a head coach during that time?
No, I agree. LSU was floundering around. Florida was floundering around. I think there's some Big Ten schools that are doing that right now.
Yes, but it's very fluid.
No, and I think they'll be challenged, but fluid, for goodness sake. I mean, I don't understand how the SEC can get that much better when they're adding a Texas and Oklahoma, when their schools have spent money to have these fantastic facilities. Everybody has them now, and I think they're going to match the money. I'll also say this: the big war daddy, the guy who's 6'5" and 330 pounds, and remind you of Vince Wilfork, those guys are more oftentimes found in the South, and they win championships. We saw what Alabama did to Notre Dame in that college football playoff. That was based off interior line play on both sides.
Well, yes, also because Ohio State was on probation and couldn't go that year because Ohio State was undefeated. Remember, Alabama would have beaten Ohio State, not the way they beat Notre Dame. Manny Diatteo was distracted by his fake girlfriend too. Okay. Where I'm getting at though is this. You are right. Way more war daddies in the South. That's why they win more championships. That's what I missed 10 years ago. So I don't know if you remember 10 years ago when Ohio State won the national title and Jim Harbaugh was going to the Big Ten and James Franklin was building up Penn State. Many people said, you know what? The Big Ten's about to compete with the SEC. Because remember Michigan State was rolling during that time too?
Yes.
And many of us thought the Big Ten was actually going to compete. Well, they didn't win another title until this year. Why? What you brought up, the war daddies. Harbaugh took forever to break through. Urban Meyer ended up getting in a scandal again and resigning and faking some other illness. Michigan State fell apart because of the Larry Nassar scandal, and they still have not recovered from that.
And it's not like you can go out and pay $2 million to a quarterback and get the perfect fit. You don't need just one or two. You need about four of them. We've talked about rotations and injuries before. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. I think the Big Ten money and revenue difference is so substantial, and I mean so substantial, that it neutralizes the location advantage the SEC has with the war daddies, because they're going to be able to start coming to Georgia and Florida and offering twice as much as Georgia and Florida and Alabama offer theirs and Tennessee offer those kids. And that's what's going. So that's going to neutralize it, because you're right. Right now, Big Ten coaches, SEC coaches are better. Kalen, 3 of the 4 college football playoff coaches are in the SEC now, and Kalen DeBoer, Kirby Smart. I can just go down the list. The Big Ten is floundering. Ryan Day is. You and I think he's fired after this year. Lincoln Riley's in big trouble at USC. I think the best coach of the Big Ten may be Dan Lanning at Oregon right now, but I would say that's fluid. Dave, the setup of coaches is very different in 5 years. The Big Ten could have the best coaching group in 2028, and you're already seeing this at smaller schools. Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. Luke Fickell is one of the best coaches in football, and I you know what? Wisconsin is about to have the money to keep him from ever going to an SEC school, and I'm telling you, that's the issue. Iowa, Big Ten is going to step in and force Iowa to fire Kirk Ferentz. Watch.
Okay, I was hoping you would get to that. Here's an issue with that. Iowa's fine. I have sources at Iowa, coincidentally. Iowa's fine with what they're doing. Making a Citrus Bowl, getting hammered by the Vols. That's fun to them. They don't have the same mindset that our listeners do, where it's win a championship or bust, basically, which it is with most SEC fan bases. So are you going to tell Iowa that their philosophical approach to how they put together a football team is wrong? Because they're going to come back at you and say, no, we're not going to spend all this extra money in football. we might spend it on our writing department, which is their post-grad writing department, for reasons I don't want to explain, is the best in the nation. So,
Or their wrestling team.
Yeah, or their wrestling team. But point is, you can take it and stuff it. We're good with making it and playing Tennessee every once in a while. We know we're never going to beat Ohio State and Michigan. At that point, aren't you at the point where it's time to take the best 32 and we're not having a Big Ten SEC discussion? Because Vanderbilt's not going to be able to do it. They're too far behind. Some programs, South Carolina's not going to up and do it. There are a lot of programs in both conferences that aren't going to up and do this. So at that point, just build your 32.
So Iowa, you may have a point, because Iowa, it's like that's kind of knowing what you are. Like Mississippi State knows they're not a national title program. They get a coach that can be very good. Maybe I was wrong on speaking on Iowa.
In Mississippi State, when Mississippi State and Ole Miss were 1 and 2, do you remember it was on the front page of this magazine called Sports Illustrated? Our friend Andy Staples wrote it. I mean, that was a big deal. So Mississippi State fans are probably fine with that. They were fine with Mike Leach and his exciting offense.
Okay, I agree. And maybe that is what Iowa is. But here's the thing. Nebraska won't be content with that.
I agree with you there.
And I don't think Wisconsin's going to be content with that. Oregon has never been content. They're still mad that they can't. Like, Oregon has always been trying to get to that next level, have they not? Like, Phil Knight wants to see them reach that level before he dies, and he will open checkbooks. And now there's Big Ten revenue. USC's not content with that. Do you not agree that Lincoln Riley's probably fired after this year by USC? They don't like him in LA.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance of that. I want to go back to something you said about Phil Knight. Phil Knight may spend all the money in the world with Oregon, but Tennessee's a Nike school. And all those schools need to remind him that him spending money on Oregon is fine, but he doesn't need to be a major donor or stroking 9-digit checks. He can be a donor, but he doesn't need to turn them into a team that's going to beat everybody else that pays him money.
Okay, fair enough, but he still might do that. Another crazy part, but David,
would you agree with that? I mean, I didn't mean to get sidetracked, but
no,
that's always been funny to me.
They haven't been able to stop it to this point. And here's the other one. I'm just going to say it. Because he's the ultimate troll on Twitter, he might do this. What if Elon Musk decides he wants to get involved in college football? He's a Rutgers grad. And what if he says, I'm going to spend all the money in the world to make Rutgers a powerhouse in football? I am opening a checkbook. Elon Musk would do that and just say, I'm going to buy talent at Rutgers and make Rutgers a powerful program.
I can provide a little bit of insight to that. So I saw that happen at Maryland, where the
Kevin
the
Plank.
guy Under Armour,
Mm-hmm.
where he got excited and statute of limitations, I guess, bought some players and got them, and that was all well and good, but he quickly realized that while he may think he's a mega booster, and I think of Under Armour as a big brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not with the same level of let's use Tennessee, the pilots of the world that are selling oil.
But Elon Musk is on that level, though.
Right. That's what. Right. Yeah. That's what would be exciting. What I would pay to see, and we'd have maybe a daily segment on Elon's world. How's the oblong ball treating him?
And there's another layer, by the way. You have to say this with Maryland, and I'm close to the program for those, as you guys know. They also hired a terrible head coach in Randy Edsall, who did not know how to manage the talent that Kevin Plank, basically bought him on the low end.
Let's be careful with Randy. Used to always watch me on Facebook. You can tell who's watching you on Facebook. Randy Edsall used to always watch me. I would just stop and say, "Hi, Randy."
And the other hard part was you couldn't openly buy players during that time. So it's a little different now. I'm telling you, though, that money is going to start rolling in with the Big Ten, and they will be openly buying players. Look, let's take the Northeast for a minute. Let's just take Elon Musk and Rutgers and the Big Ten money. Football is embedded in the South. You are right. But if one school got all the good players from the Northeast, I mean, there's not a lot of them, but if you got all of them to go to one school, they could compete, right?
Are you including the DMV, that little area?
Yes, DC to Boston, just all the good players.
No doubt. Now I question whether or not they have the same passion for players from other areas, but
Right.
worry about that when you get to the championship game, right?
Yes. What if Rutgers determined we can just had a monopoly? They just got every single good player from DC to Boston.
Elon Musk could have Rutgers winning a championship within 5 years.
You don't think that's on their radar, doing that?
Do I think it's on Rutgers' radar or the Big Ten's radar?
The Big Ten's Rutgers and Elon Musk. The Big Ten added Rutgers for a reason. They wanted the New York market.
I don't know that it's on Elon Musk. I mean, Elon Musk has a lot going on, right?
Please, he just sits there and trolls people on Twitter. Like he just trolls people on Twitter. Someone should be like, "Hey, Elon, go buy a college football team and just see if you can make him a national title contender." He would do it just because he does that type of stuff. So I'm just saying that something like that, and the Big Ten revenue, the money the Big Ten's bringing in, again, the SEC. Greg Sankey may have told you that the SEC contract is not ironclad. Maybe he's right.
No, he didn't. He didn't tell me that. I got the read off that. I don't want to miss. Yeah.
He's giving off the read and the vibe to a lot of people that it's not ironclad. That's like when a politician who's losing an election gives off the read, like, well, my internal polling shows I'm going to win. That's hopeful and wishful thinking. Okay. It's the same way Florida State tries to tell us the ACC contract they're in is not ironclad. We had T. Scott Jones on. He's like, no, that thing looks ironclad to me. And so, I mean, that is very wishful thinking. And I have to be honest, that Big Ten contract can push the Big Ten schools will be the Yankees. The SEC schools may end up being the Athletics.
Okay. I can roll with that.